you guys. But the steel block underneath here gives a little more support. Actually, if I just tap, you can hear. And when you hear this, it's definitely a different sound. It's like a little more solid. So it helps a little bit to get that so it doesn't bounce so much. And the other thing I use is what we call a dead blow hammer. Yeah, it's filled with buckshot. I don't know if you can hear that or not. There's buckshot in there. So when you hit, I was showing Evan when he first came here how there's no recoil, If you use like a regular hammer, which I used to use, you start putting frets in. If you're going to put 1, 2 frets in, or maybe even a whole set, it might be okay. But when you put as many frets in as I did, you don't want to use one of these. Your arm would probably be completely ruined, When you hit something with this, there's absolutely no recoil at all. So when you lay down on the fret, it's really solid, The one thing I can tell you right now about putting frets in, like I said, is you get the radius a little more than what the fingerboard is. And I was showing Evan. Actually, Evan put a whole set of frets in. What basement was the one that went to John up in Madison, right? Madison, Wisconsin. Yeah, I stood beside him and guided him through it. But he put all the frets in, and then I finished them off, But he put them all in. And the thing is, before you start pounding frets in, I usually set it and kind of press it in, and I take a look at it before I start hammering, because, okay, I got the fingerboard right, I got the radius right, I got all that. Before you start pounding, look at it. And what are you going to look for? You're going to look to see if it's going to seat right. Is it sitting in there? Is it just, if it's laying on the top, maybe the slot isn't deep enough at that point. Maybe, I know you cut them all and you did all that stuff you thought you did, but there's a possibility one maybe wasn't quite as deep as you thought it was, okay? So when you see the fret not really seating right like that, then I would go back in with, a hand fret saw and just open it up a little bit. This one looks good. The other thing I do is I use a little bit of crazy glue, not necessarily to hold the fret in, but it does do that a little bit, but also lubricates the slots so it doesn't go, so it goes in nice and even. Like I used to use regular wood glue, like Elmer's glue. I used to use that way back. Well, way back there was no crazy glue, not available to me anyway. Maybe the armed services had it, I understand, but the space age programs had it, but it wasn't. You didn't go to the local CVS store and get it. That's for sure. As far as I know, it didn't exist. But it's nice, and I always keep a fresh tube here. I keep my hammers handy, and this little hammer, I'll show you what I do with that later on too. And I keep a saw handy because, like I said before, you might want to open up the slot a little bit, or you might see a little speck of dust in there. You might want to get it out. I keep an air can around just in case, blow off the dust, right? A brush, brush off. These are all the little things you should have right here, okay? Paper towel, because when I use the glue, sometimes I'm not as young as I used to be. My hands are a little shaky, and sometimes I get a little too much glue, and I got to, before it sets up too much, I wipe it down, okay? The fret cutters, which is what you use to trim the frets and also cut it. But sometimes I pick up a piece of fret wire, and it doesn't quite look right in there, and I may have to take them and just do something like this. You may have to want to, bend the end down just a little bit, Maybe it wasn't sitting quite right, And again, I'll tell you the truth, back in the old days, I didn't have a fret bender. I didn't even know what a fret bender was. And you have to remember, I wasn't a woodworker. I wasn't a skilled craftsman. I'm still not, I don't think. You know, anybody who claims that is, I don't know what that's all about. Names. I think I'll be a journeyman first. Bullshit. Yeah. I won't mention any names. My friend Joe told me he saw something on, what was that, Joe?
It was a Talkbase.
Talkbase, yeah. A couple of so-called super craftsmen were telling the world all about that kind of stuff, and that's kind of sad, I think, you know, because in the reality is everybody should do whatever they can to better themselves, and you know, if you want to make it. When I started making instruments, I wasn't a woodworker. I was a jazz guitar player, and although I did a lot of repair work and I put frets in, I did setups for a lot of famous and people with Dan Armstrong. All those years I spent doing it, but I never built an instrument. At that time, I never had a real gouge in my hand. I didn't even know what that was, you know, to carve or